Welcome to Award-Winning Photography Explained. I am your host, Manpreet. And today we have with us Donald Lewis, more fondly known as Don. Now, Don is a photographer, he's a musician, he's an airline pilot, a proud father of two beautiful girls, and married to a lovely wife, Stephanie. Welcome, Don.
Thank you for having me, sir.
So, being from Moncton, New Brunswick, he is surrounded by the beauty of Atlantic provinces. His inspiration for his work in landscapes, seascapes, and leads on to his portraits and weddings. Now, Don, just want to introduce yourself. Tell us how you got interested in photography.
I got invested in photography initially when my first little girl was born. That was a very profound moment, as it is for any father. And of course, you want to capture the life and document that sort of thing. And then I picked up a camera, but at the time I was actually working for a company that dealt directly with conservation of nature and wildlife in Canada, doing airborne surveillance. And in the surveillance role, we used DSLRs. There was a lot of talk in the office about settings and what to use and ISO and all this sort of thing, always in the back of my earpiece. And buying a camera, I'm now a little bit more interested. I'm picking up on the things I didn't hear before because all of a sudden I'm interested. I'm technologically oriented anyway, so I kind of had to know a bit more. And so here I am surrounded by, I mean, we're out over Newfoundland, one of the most beautiful places in the world. We've seen as far north as Maine. I've flown out of Comox, BC. Everybody I work with was invested in nature, at least in some way. And we saw sunrises and sunsets and beautiful sights. So of course we all got used to capturing it on our phones, and we got capturing it on our cameras. And one thing sort of led to another. And eventually I'm now going around with my tripod when I'm away on these flights that are on my overnight stays. And as my career grew and I left and went to WestJet, I moved to Moncton, New Brunswick, where my wife is from. And now here we have some beautifully clear skies, and I started taking on night photography and trying to capture what was new to me. It wasn't Newfoundland, it wasn't what I was used to. It was finding the beauty that is here. So that was really the beginning for me, was picking up that camera the first time and documenting that, but then starting to appreciate everything that was around me from all those people.
Being a pilot, that was your profession, right?
That's correct, yes.
And the musician, Don?
That was a long-standing hobby. I'm proud to be I don't want to use the word veteran, alumni of the Air Cadet program. I learned to play the saxophone.
Nice.
And then I joined a group. It was really a volunteer band called the COB Band COB Regimental Band in St. John's, Newfoundland, a paramilitary group. And this group has some very long history roots. The band itself is over 100 years old, and it does all the civic parades. It did a lot of mess dinners. It did a lot of church services and so on and so forth. We also, the main band for the Royal St. John's Regatta that happens every year. It's a big event. It's a boat race, but it's also a fair, and it's a huge, huge, huge thing. It's the only movable holiday in all of Canada. If it rains, it moves to the next day. It's very weird. It's very Newfoundland. But that gave me a chance to travel to France. We went in 2016 to honor the Battle of the Somme and sacrifice of Newfoundlanders there on the 100th anniversary from the First World War. So I got to play in France, I got to play in Belgium, and in the Tower of London, and that was all a very big honor to do that, to commemorate the soldiers that have fallen there. And we stopped along the Trail of the Caribou, and we had, which is where all of Newfoundlanders had fought in France, in northeastern France, and Belgium. And we read the stories of each person, and not the stories of their service, like the stories of their homes, the stories of the streets they grew up on, the streets that we grew up on. and it was a very emotional trip. So that's the musician life. It was very deeply rooted in the paramilitary side of that, um, being in the cadet uniform first and then a COB uniform later. But it was all volunteer work, and it was almost, I want to say, 16 years from the time I joined the COB to the time I left, and it was very, very good long time. So it was a great way to outreach in the community.
So do you feel your music kind of overlaps into your photography?
Most certainly. When I left Newfoundland, I was a hobbyist photographer. This was about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't spend. It was pictures of things I liked and pictures of my kids, but it wasn't really serious. And when I left that Newfoundland, I left that outlet, that musical outlet, and then I wanted to get creative. And I think that's what drove me to sort of deep dive into photography. Playing with a communal band, a group of volunteers, everybody's together, feeling when the notes are good, feeling performing often. You get those senses of wonder, you get those senses of sorrow, you get those senses of emotion. Um, and a sunrise or the Milky Way, when you observe it for the first time or 100th time, they're always different.
Yeah.
And the same feelings come through.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I believe you are doing photography as a profession as well. You photograph portraits and weddings. You also conduct workshops, do night photography, right?
That's correct. So my first accreditation and my main focus in photography was landscape excuse me, night
Mm-hmm.
accreditation, and then followed by a pictorial scene accreditation with PPOC. But that mainly, in terms of a business, was selling photographic prints at fairs, at shows, and that sort of thing. And also, I've picked up I enjoy weddings. I enjoy the pressure of weddings.
Mm-hmm.
I Not a lot of people say that. I enjoy being in the moment and connecting with a bride and groom on a very deep level, and then being a part of their day. And it's almost like being inducted into their family, which is so very special and meaningful. So I do that. And then when it comes to portraits, it's less of a advertised thing, but if people approach me and I'm available, I'm more than happy to take portraits.
And for those who don't know, PPOC stands for Professional Photographers of Canada, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. This incredible image of yours called Now I Rest, that received a merit in the regional competition in 2021, also received a Best in Class award, and then also a merit in Nationals in 2022. It's such a beautiful, calming image that's been composed so well, and the atmosphere you have created there is absolutely stunning. Tell us a little bit about this picture. How did you photograph this? Was it planned? Was it on the spur of the moment? Take us a little behind the scenes.
I had wanted to photograph Point Wolf at sunset, which is in Fundy National Park, and me and my friends made plan. A rather great photographer named Norm Thibault. So through a series of unfortunate events, if you wish to call them that, we ended up driving a little bit too late towards Fundy National Park. So we are taking the route as always, and we come across this house, just golden hour, and I look to him and I go, you know what, I've always wanted to take a picture of that house. And Norm has this great sense of just nonchalant drawness, which I really enjoy, and he goes, well, let's stop and take a picture of the house. We're here. And anytime I go out with this man, that's his, if I say, maybe we should get a picture of that, he's like, well, let's get one. Because I think he really much seizes the day. So we got out, and to his and my benefit, the sun broke through the clouds and the hills just behind, and we walked over to this house. And I was really taken with the scene. I only captured, I think, maybe 14 frames of this, moved around a little bit for compositional purposes. This old house on the side of the road with this big old tree leaning over it, sort of almost protectively, and a garden that was once there, and you can kind of see a little bit of the remnants and of the pathway. And I get this very distinct image of little girls playing in dresses, sort of climbing up through the straw, or generations of people in this house. And to me, the story of this image is in a way, a greater title would be, what stories I would tell, but now I rest. Because homes, especially generational homes, were Canadians and historic homes where generations of Canadians grew up in. And the stories that went on there, that there was tears, laughter, all that sort of thing. So this calming image for me was really about all those stories being told, and now what's left is just blissful sunset.
Yeah, it's amazing. The title also fits so well when you describe your feelings behind this, And I love the composition. I love the leading lines of the pathway leading into the home, the tree leaning inwards, the little bit glow of the sun onto the building. What equipment did you use to photograph this?
So this was a 16 to 35 lens. It was a Canon lens because I use a Canon camera. I am currently shooting with a Canon R5.
Mm-hmm.
I like that megapixel size for my photographic art purposes and large-scale printing. And I just grabbed my 16 to 35 and quickly got out of the car and I always generally try to shoot on a tripod. Tripod gives you a little bit more. I think it forces you more to stop and think a little bit more about what you're composing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's pretty straight shooting for that. It is a blend of 2 exposures.
Mm-hmm.
So it was shot, I think ISO 100, f13, and one at 1/13 of a second.
Okay.
And one a 1/8 of a second. And I was very lucky that it was a still day because those trees not getting a lot of motion blur in there, which is I'm very thankful for.
Very nice.
But I think a little bit of the complementary side of having that slow of a shutter speed is you might get just a hint of movement in those clouds, which I really appreciated.
Nice. And you obviously required a good tripod. What tripod did you use? Do you remember?
I use a FLM carbon fiber tripod. It is my first big purchase tripod, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
FLM has I won't call them Canadian because a lot of people do, and I know the company is German. They are a German manufacturer of carbon fiber tripods, and they do have a base in Canada. So they're very highly well recommended by myself, but also photographers like Nick Page, who does the Landscape Photography podcast. That's where I got my information on it.
Okay.
It offers a very stable, tall tripod with a very low base where you can actually get the tripod as low as I think a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch off the ground. So it doesn't have any center column. Very good sort of landscape, and especially Canadian landscapers tripod, because it comes with ice spikes for the feet, where the feet are removable, and you get these big 3/4 inch spikes that you can jam down into an icy lake.
Nice.
To make sure that your tripod is not going anywhere. So yeah, very much recommend that.
With the ball head?
Yeah, it comes with a bulb head, and actually each tripod is equipped with a movable base. So the base itself sort of rotates on an orb.
Okay.
And it allows you to level that if you're doing panoramas. So
nice.
If your tripod is not exactly level, you don't really need to shuffle with the feet too much. You can actually just unscrew something, very quickly adjust, and get a nice level.
Nice. A lot of video tripods have that feature.
Yeah, I think maybe where they got it from, I think they might have started as a video maker and then went down into stills, that sort of thing. But that's just speculation.
Very nice. And for a shutter speed like this, I would presume you had all your stabilization switched off?
I believe... Okay, so the 16 to 35 Mark II, I believe, does not have IS built in. Yeah. And I think for my R5, I pretty much set it and forget it. The only time I really turn it off is for astrophotography. So, yeah.
Nice. So what about the post-processing in this? You handle the post-processing so well. It's created almost like a glow in this. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can actually. I have the file open. I dug it out. I have the PSD with all the layers in it, so we can go through it. So this is the process from Photoshop, and I'll briefly go through it here. Keep in mind this is over a year and 6 months ago that I processed it, but I kind of refreshed my memory when I saw your show notes. So this is the base raw. It is exposed pretty much within the realms of clipping here. And I took one shot to try to maintain the details within the midtones here. And I understand that there's a little bit of the shadow recovery needed to happen. And then I took another shot to accent that wonderful sky that was happening in behind. So those are the two different frames I spoke of. And then through a process of luminosity masking, blended those tones together.
Oh, so I see you have Lumenzia there, right?
Yes, well,
Yes,
actually, when I created this, I was using Raya Pro.
Oh, yeah?
And I switched to Lumenzia when I switched to an M1 Mac because the M1 chip didn't really talk too well at the time to Raya Pro. So Lumenzia was something I started taking a little bit of more self courses on and that sort of thing. But it gives it's a great tool. And then you're going to see layers and layers and layers of curves here, guys.
That's what we're here to see.
I do a lot of work with curves. Here I'm isolating the foreground. You can see in the layers panel over here, the white. I've got that isolated, and if I bring up the properties panel, you can see the type of curve I gave there just to give it a little bump upwards in the midtones.
Nice.
I started to paint in some color and accent some of the details in the grass.
So when you say paint, is it on a layer with overlay mode?
So I got a soft light mode there.
Okay.
And I've actually selected, I believe I've sampled some of the color from the grass and just added a little bit more saturation and lightness to it. So I'm pretty much dodging with the similar color palette that's already presented to me in nature there.
Very nice.
A little bit more contrast, I think, in the darks here. And now you can see I've recovered a fair amount of detail from those lovely greens in the trees there. Working selectively through the image. And this is a color dodge and burn panel.
Okay.
Or what I would deem a color dodge and burn panel. This is the start of me painting in the leading lines, painting in a little bit more color into the brush here, still using the soft light at 100%. Then I'm accenting the house and the light falling on it, starting to build up that fading light from the left-hand side.
Right.
Now we're getting into the skies. I guess my aviation background is that I really love having dynamic skies in my images. So I'm throwing in some really, really moody curves, adjusting that brightness again for that sunset that I saw, but the exposure probably did not capture away. And now we get into color toning, getting into those golden colors. And this is an Orton effect I've added. Again, starting to get that glow. Little details now. If you notice the highlights in the sky there, they were a bit strong. Just brought them down a little bit. And then a big levels adjustment here to sort of even it out. And we've brought the tones up. We've recovered the details in the sky, or sorry, not the sky, but in this really dark tree that was here. We've gotten these nice golden tones through the leaves on the right-hand side, and we're getting that blast of light with the Orton effect from the left-hand side.
Nice. For those who don't know, can you just give us a brief explanation of what Orton effect is?
So when I create an Orton effect of light, I'm blurring the highlights and creating a glow amongst the high tones.
Okay.
Orton effect can be used for mist. It can be used for falling light. I use it to soften any sort of hard light or lines that I want a painterly effect on. It's really can be accomplished in a variety of different ways in terms of contrast, but I think the overall I guess the fundamental part of that, of what it is sort of that nice soft glow you get from light falling onto things.
Nice.
Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely, and it creates the early morning feeling, or late evening feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
No worries. So this is a selective color layer. I am playing with the palette of blues in this selective color, I use selective color a lot to target specific colors. If I'm targeting greens, where I can add yellow or magenta into those palettes, and if you can see in my selector here, you can add any of those CMYK or CMYB really colors into any subsection of a color and really alter greens or yellows or blues dramatically. So now we're getting down to pretty much what was the final product. Right about here, I want to show you one more. I missed over a step that I wanted to highlight. I want you to keep a look on the left-hand side of the image. There was some distraction I took out too, and the distraction was a White House that really sat right here. I don't know if you can see the cursor.
Okay.
And I can't really see where the layer was on, but a big part of what I do in landscape work is shaping the eye. I've shown you guys a lot of how I've brought in the leading lines, and I've shown your viewers, I guess, how I've retained some of those details in the shadows, and I've shaped that light. But eliminating distractions, especially on the borders of the frames of the image, is quite powerful in terms of keeping the viewer entertained to your story. And the story in this point is truly the house and the light, and everything else just complements that in itself. Right? So that is where I wanted to make sure I highlighted that. So when I'm removing anything, you can remove distraction by blending color.
Yeah.
My initial palette here was a lot more green and brown and murky, versus now it's a lot more golden tones and desaturated. And you can and then the other thing is just straight out removing. There was a small house right here that was white that I got rid of. So that is the process of how I built that image up. And do you have any questions?
No, it's an incredible image. The way you have finally got the attention onto the house and the glow on the house, so that your eye goes from the sunset to the house, and the relationship between them, as you explained it. And when you put in the title, "Now I Rest," it makes so much sense. So how did you? I understand you entered this into the competition. How did you polish this up differently for the competition? Did you do anything specific for it?
I'm going to just bring back to my competition image, just so we can compare the two. So this is the competition image as it was entered into the regionals, and then a slight change, and that is the one for nationals.
Nice.
So regionals did quite well, but what you have seen me create here on your screen was the regionals image, which is what you see here now. After regionals, I was very happy. I had never gotten a merit before, which if you wanted to look from the outside of Professional Photographers of Canada, you can akin that to a silver medal. And going into nationals, I wanted to feel stronger, and I think that this image required just a hint more of sculpting in terms of that impact. But polishing it up, I'm very much emotional about my images. I told you about my story about it, and I get really heavily invested. So my first step before entering a competition is to show a set of images to friends, show them to family, and show them to colleagues. My wife is a sounding board because she's somebody who knows nothing about photography. But being someone who knows nothing about photography is the first person to go, well, what's that over there? Because she's not going to feel like she's going to impact me because she doesn't know the creative process or invested process that I have in it. And those colleagues who I enter with who are also involved in the organization help incredibly, because they can see for the first time something I've looked at for hours and instantly pick up on a detail that might need to be removed, or distraction, or a crop that might need to tell the story a little bit more. And that's just what happened. I'll bring back the other image.
Yeah, I think it's very, very much needed. We get too close to our image emotionally, and even working on it for so long, that sometimes we can't see certain things which a person looking at it for the first time sees right away.
Yes, and I'm hesitant to call anything a flaw.
Yeah.
However, there's things that might be overlooked, and there might be ideas that you're trying to present from a impact or story side that other people might not get. That's the sort of thing when you talk to colleagues, you get that information back, and I feel that without that, I wouldn't have grown as much as I have, and that sort of thing. And I owe a credit to them. I owe a credit to the people who suggested the very thin mat key line with the matting that is subtly undertones the image, which I think it gives it a nice definition. And the group of people we have arranged around ourselves, we're in my region, within the organization that we both are members of, but which this is the one the award, the Professional Photographers of Canada. The camaraderie is so very good and so open. So I would say that listening to feedback is definitely crucial.
Nice.
It's crucial to listen and be open to feedback, because sometimes it's going to sting a little. Being open to it and accepting of it and walking away from it and try to internalize it on your own plane, that would allow anybody who's entering competition to get better. And that is probably the key there.
Nice. That leads me perfectly into my next question, is entering competitions. How has this helped you personally in your photography and professionally in your commercial work? Has it made a difference?
Professionally, let's talk about an interaction with a client. Like I do a lot of shows. I have my art printed. I have it matted. It's mounted. It's sitting on a grid wall next to me. And people come over and they stop and they go, wow. And they walk in. Okay, so somebody walks in. They've already got that. I'm here. So now you need to build an emotional connection with somebody from a business standpoint, right? And you need to build value. And in such a hard Canadian market where there's so much competition and so much pressure, people have to resonate with you enough to spend their hard-earned money.
Yeah.
So when it comes to talking about my piece, and this piece was actually gifted as a giveaway with my website when I first started, it's something local. It's something that the local people and people who are from here resonated with deeply. It's something that once they found awards, they were like, oh wow, like it is a feather in the cap sort of thing. And it's a big prideful thing for me because it was my first award. And coming from my previous life of aviation and really being someone who's always strived for the next step, competition has allowed me to sort of give myself self-critique of how have I done this year to last year, and where do I want to bring my art next, creatively, inspirationally, literally in the world. Where do I want to explore next and come back with these stories and create work to show people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think considering good, legit competitions, the way the judges are vetted and trained gives you assurance that you have feedback from somebody who has a proper understanding. And it's one thing that your family tells you, oh, your work is great, but when it's a panel of judges that's qualified tells you it's great, it boosts your confidence itself and the confidence of your client and everybody else around you. You talked about association. Tell us a little bit about what is PPOC and how has being a part of this association impacted you?
I joined PPOC in, I would say 3 years ago. Yes, 3 years ago. I've achieved my Craftsman of Photographic Arts.
Nice.
Which is a huge feather in my cap, but what that means to anybody outside of the organization is that I've met a matrix of having 2 accreditations, several award-winning photos, and then alternatively a lot of service back into the organization. that service comes in terms of talking to new members about benefits, and also in terms of striving to educate new members. And I also serve as a conference chair. And the conference chair allowed me to arrange to have education brought into the maritime provinces with in the height of the COVID pandemic, which was so much work. However, it allowed me to give people who had been really sort of struggling, creative and artistically, to get an outreach. So the organization for me is strongly about community. It's strongly about fellowship, and it's strongly about giving my art a challenge so that I find purpose in it. It's deeply rooted in the three of those things. I really enjoy giving back and in helping other people find their way in their business and succeeding, and in terms of learning. And anytime I've had a question, whether it's about how to price my work, where to price my work, how to use lighting, what Adobe Photoshop setting I cannot find today, I've reached out to so many members in my organization with random questions, and people as far as BC to Newfoundland have answered me and said, you should probably do this, or you might like to go here, or next time you shoot your photo, maybe you want to consider X. And everybody's been polite, humbling, and supportive, and it really has been a wonderful experience in my journey. And I aim to help everybody who comes behind me in the organization have an exceptional journey as well. And as I go forward into my next convention in October, I've got some great talent from across Canada coming down to Halifax, and I look forward to having everybody who wants to come see it come on down, because it's going to be fantastic.
Now, this is a national organization having professional members all across from BC to the East Coast, correct?
Correct.
So, if there's a young photographer who is just starting out, wants to create images like yourself, what is, say, one or two pieces of advice that you would give him or her?
One or two pieces of advice. The internet is your friend, but it's also your enemy. I would say that you can look up anything on the internet with regards to photography and receive an answer. You will receive 500 answers. So I would say be very critical in what you want to learn and very specific. Do not think that gear is the ultimate option. Knowledge is power always, in any sense of the imagination. And you can create a work of art with anything. Do you need to upgrade your gear or not? That's not something the internet can answer. That's something you can answer. I feel every young photographer goes through that question at some point. But I would say build a foundation of knowledge and then pick very, very key things that you want to do. Look to other photographers you want to be like. Look at their examples of work. Try to replicate them. Challenge yourself. And once you get to that point where you're trying, and if you're failing, you're learning, which is fantastic. And then the next step is probably look at those photographers again and see if they've offered some sort of digital learning platform. Creative Live is one that we all know and use in the organization. However, there's a lot of individual platforms picking up. A lot of what you saw in my Photoshop came from Nick Page's landscape photography tutorials and elements of mastering Photoshop and dodging and burning, which was immensely helpful to me. But I took time to pick it before I spent the hard-earned money to dive into it. So I guess be wise with your money. Educate yourself in a wide fashion first, and then really sharpen the pencil and put a fine point on it. So hopefully somebody gains some good wisdom out of that.
Oh, that's very, very well said. It is beautifully put. If people want to reach you, get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So I'm very active on Instagram. It's very simple, don.lewis.photography on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. I am tipping my toe into TikTok just a little bit. So I'm very afraid of video right now, but it's something I'm challenging myself on. I also have a website and a blog, donlewis.ca. I very much invite people to come and follow my journeys and my very, very crazy shenanigans there.
I will definitely put all those links in the show notes. And thank you very much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. It was something I learned a lot. And well, to our viewers, if you've enjoyed this, please make sure you hit the subscribe button.